more detail. We started this 48th mention last time. the import of the Vedic statement, Apanipada, that Brahman has no legs and hands. The import is that the Bhagavan is inherently self-endowed with an eternal, unlimited, self-manifest, blissful form. There is no other conclusion. There is no other intended conclusion. The personified Vedas are praying that Tvam Akaranaha Swarad Akila Karaka Shakti Daras Tava Balim Udvahanti Samadant Ajaya Animishaha Varushabhujo Akila Kshiti Patireva Vishwasrujo Vidadati Yatra Ye Tvadikrita Bhavataschakitaha Tvam Akaranaha. Although you are without Karana, without the senses, but Swarad, you are supremely independent. Akila Karaka Shakti Daras, upholder of everyone's sensory powers. Varusha Bhujo, no, just like the tributary kings pay homage to an emperor. Varusha Bhujo Akila Kshiti Pati Reva. Similarly, the administrators of the universe, Ajaya, accompanied by Maya, bear offerings to you, Balim Udvahanti, while gladly consuming the oblations offered to them by the human beings. Varusha Bhujo. Vidadati, they carry out the responsibilities out of Bhavatas Chakitaha, out of awe and reverence towards you. So, Ayam Arthaha. So, first it is mentioned that Tvam Akaranaha. So, Karana means what? Karana means an instrument, sensory organ. Atra Karanam Nama Vasyadivat Kartru Shakti Preritaya Karyakaram Kartrur Binnatamam Kevala Karanatva Pannameva Vastu Angikritam Natu Swarupatva Apannamapi Yattadapi. So here the word Karana is used to indicate Vasya Adivat. It is used to indicate an instrument or a tool. Like suppose a woodcutter is using a particular tool, hatchet. It is used to indicate an instrument such as an hatchet used by a woodcutter. And Kartru Shakti Preritaya, which is utilized by the agent in order to accomplish his objectives. And Kartru...
Prabhuji, Karna means even ear, no? Karna is ear or to hear?
That is Karna. That is Karna is Karana is, there is Refottara Akara is there. After Refa, there is the Akara is there. Swara is there. That is Karana. Karana, in that there is no Refottara Akara.
Acha, that hook-like thing upstairs, like that. That is Karna. Ana with that hook-like upstairs. That
yes.
is. Okay.
Immediately after, in Sanskrit, para we call it as Refa. Suppose we have to call the other letters, we say Akara means A. Kakara means only Ka. For Ra, we call it as Refa. After Refa, there is no Akara in Karana. That means ear. In Karana, After refa, there is akara.
Okay, thank you.
So kartrubir binnatamam. That means the karana is utilized by the agent in order to accomplish his objectives. At the same time, the karana is entirely distinct from him. Kartrur binnatamam. Kartrur binnatamam. The instrument is distinct from the person who is utilizing it. It is entirely distinct from him and functions purely as an extension of the agent. And karana does not include anything that is an integral part of the agent's nature. Vastu angikritam natu swarupatva apannamapi ettadapi. The instrument, suppose a woodcutter is using an instrument. That instrument does not include anything which is an integral part of the agent, the woodcutter. Just like, for example, the burning potency is an integral part of the fire. But in the case of an instrument like an hatchet, it does not include any integral part of the karta who is using it. This is the nature of a karana, any instrument. Yata dahanadau tachaktyadikam gaunartatvat swarat pada niruktau svena iti tritiyanta padasya sarupashaktaveva paryavasanacha. So, in such cases, the word karana would have a secondary meaning. In the sense, when we, in such cases, means, suppose karana has got some aspect which is an integral part of the karta, then in that case, the karana will have a secondary meaning. The karana, the word karana, in the primary sense of in the primary meaning of the word karana is that karana is something which is distinct from the karta. Karana is used by the karta to accomplish certain objective. And it is entirely distinct from the karta, and it does not include anything which is an integral part of the agent's nature. Just like a burning potency is an integral part of the fire. So furthermore, in the etymological derivation of the word swarat means supremely independent. Swarat means svena rajate. The etymological derivation of the word swarat, which means svena rajate, the word svena is used in the tritiya vibhakti, instrumental case. Tritiya vibhakti is used to indicate a karana, instrumental case. The word svena indicates that such powers are part of the essential nature of Bhagavan. When the Bhagavan is called a Swarat, Svena Rajate, which is in the instrumental case. That means Bhagavan uses certain energies to accomplish his objective, and those energies are part of his essential nature. They are part of his essential nature. Sarupa Shakta Veva Paryavasanacha. ततो जीवस्य चिद्रूपत्वात् पाण्यादीनां स्वतो जडत्वात् तद अदीन शक्तीनां तेषां भिन्नतमानां करणत्वं मुख्यार्थमेव ततोऽसौ तद आसक्तत्वात् सकरणः. So in the case of the living being who is chid rupatvat, who is conscious by nature. In the case of the living being, The primary meaning of the word Karana applies to the living beings' hands, legs, ears, nostrils, etc. Because in the case of the living being, the different senses like hands, legs, etc., they are by nature inert. And that Adina Shaktina, they are dependent on the Jivatma's energy. And Binnatamana. And these senses, hands, legs, etc., they are all different from the living entity. They are completely distinct from the Jivatma. And because the Jivatma is connected to these senses, so therefore, Jivatma is called as Sakaranaha. Tad Asaktatvat. Because the Jivatma is connected to the senses, therefore he is called as Sakaranaha. So Bhagavan is called as Akaranaha, but Jivatma is called as Sakaranaha. That means the Jivatma is possessor of the senses. But Bhagavan is without the senses. But without the senses does not mean that he has no form. Rather, Bhagavan has spiritual senses which are not distinct from him, which are integral to his nature, and these spiritual senses are used by Bhagavan to accomplish different actions.
So, Prabhuji, sorry to interrupt. So, which is the case you mentioned? That first was that instrumental, and then which is the third one? Dative. What is it? What in English? What do you say?
Instrumental cases are Tritiya Vibhakti.
Okay.
Tritiya in Sanskrit there are 7 Vibhaktis are there. Pratama Vibhakti, Dvitiya Vibhakti onwards till the Saptami Vibhakti. Pratama Vibhakti is used for the subject. Dvitiya Vibhakti is used for the object. Tritiya Vibhakti is used for the instrument.
Okay. Thank
Chaturthi
you.
Vibhakti is used for Chaturthi Vibhakti is called as a dative case. Krishnaya Namaha. Krishnaya, I offer obeisances unto him. Krishnaya is used in the Chaturthi Vibhakti. Chaturthi Vibhakti is also used in other purposes like
Is it Sampradan or us? Is it like that? Yeah.
Sampradana Karaka. When you give, suppose, a charity to somebody, the person whom you give charity, that person will be used in the Chaturthi Vibhakti. Rameshaha Gam Krishnaya Dadami. So the person whom he is giving charity, that for him the Krishnaya is using Chaturthi Vibhakti. Panchami Bhakti is called as Apadana Karaka. English word I have to say. Apadana means from Vrikshat Patram Patati. So the leaf is actually falling from the Vriksha. So from where it is getting separated. So for that the Panchami Bhakti will be used. Also
It is
Agarika.
alag you say, no? उससे अलग हो गया. So, alag.
And then Shashti Vibhakti is used in the possessive case. Krishnasya say Abharanam or Rameshasya Pustakam. Ramesh's book, the book which belongs to him, that is the Shashti Vibhakti. Saptami Vibhakti is used in the Adhikarana sense. The place of action or the time in which it is taking place, for that the Saptami Vibhakti is used. And then there is a Sampradana Karaka. When you want to address the person, the Sampradana Karaka is used. Hey Ram, Hey Krishna. For that the same Pratama Vibhakti is used, but there is a Sampradana Karaka. So here,
Thank you.
So in the case of the living entity, the senses of the living entities are different from him, and the senses of the living entities are inert by nature, and therefore the living entity is called as Sakarana. But the Bhagavan is called as Akarana. Tvam tu tad antaryami tad anasaktatvad tad anapeksho yatah swarat swarupa shaktya eva rajase iti. But you, on the other hand, are the supreme self dwelling in the interiority of each and every individual self. And anasaktatva, being unattached to the individual senses, you are independent. Tad anapeksho. Bhagavan is not dependent on the senses. Like we are dependent on our eyes to see something. We are dependent on our ear to see something. But Bhagavan is not dependent, he is independent. Because he is Swarat. Swarupa Shaktya eva Rajasi. He is self-luminous by the potency which is inherent in his essential being. And then Jiva Goswami quotes another shloka from the same personified Vedas prayer. Tata pralaya kalavasane. At the time of dissolution, the personified Vedas pray. Nibrita marunmanoksha drida yoga yujo hridiyan munaya upasate tadarayopi ayusmaranat striya uragendra bhoga bhujadanda vishaktadiyo vayamapi te sama samadrushongri sarojasudaha. So the personified Vedas are praying that Nibrita Marun Manoksha Drida Yoga Yujo Hridiyan. The very state which the silent sages, Munaya, Upasate, which they contemplate in their hearts, Hridiyan Upasate, after having regulated Nibrita Marun Manur, after having regulated their vital force, mind, and senses through Drida Yoga, through the resolute practice of yoga. So whatever state the munis attain by rigid practice of yoga, by contemplating in their hearts, whatever they attain, tad arayo api yayuhu smaranat. The same perfection is attained by your enemies simply through remembering you out of enmity. And then third line, Striya Uragendra Bhoga Bhuja Danda Vishakta Diyo. The cowherd men who set their minds on your stout arms, Uragendra Bhoga Bhuja, which resembled the body of the king of the snakes. And we who drink the nectar of your lotus feet, Saroja Sudha, we also attain that same state, being equal in your eyes. Samadrusho. Vayamapi te sama samadrusho. So this verse is quoted by Vishwanath Jiva Goswami. Actually, I didn't exactly get for what purpose it is quoted because this verse is not elaborated. This verse is quoted. Okay, we will go ahead. I would like to refer some other commentary to find out what is the connection from the previous paragraph to this verse quoted. Because the next paragraph also does not elaborate this shloka. But we will go ahead. Vidvad guna gurubir asmabirapi nija alambanattvena varnyamana parama divya karana gana vichitro api asau akarana eva. So Vidvad Gana Gurubir Asmabir. We, personified Vedas, are saying that we, who are the teachers of the wise, and we glorified you as our shelter, stating that you have supreme, transcendental, and extraordinary senses. Divya Karana Gana Vichitra Api Asau. And yet you are without any senses. We glorified you as a shelter, as our shelter, stating that you have supreme, transcendental, extraordinary senses. At the same time, you are without any senses. How is that possible? So I think the previous shloka which is quoted, the previous shloka, the Nibrita Marun Manu, this verse is quoted. In this verse, the same personified Vedas are actually clearly indicating how the Bhagavan has senses. Bhagavan has a palm. Because the enemies actually meditated out of enmity towards towards the Lord. That means he must have some palm, he must have senses. And the same thing the sages also contemplated in their hearts. And the cowherd women, their minds were focused on the arms of the Lord. So that shows that he has senses actually. That shows he has senses. And we also aspire to attain that state. And being equal in your eyes. Samadrusho, being equal in your eyes, that means Bhagavan has the eyes actually. He has senses. The same Vedas in that shloka is saying Akarana, but in this shloka they are indicating how the Bhagavan has senses. So that's why Jiva Goswami says that we who are teachers of the wise glorified you as our shelter, stating that you have supreme, transcendental, extraordinary senses. That is this shloka 10.87.23. But yet you are without senses. That is the yet you are without senses. That is the main verse of this Anucheda. That is 10.87.28. And yet you are without senses. How is that possible? Kutaha? How can we resolve the contradiction? Swarat. Svena Swarupa Shakti Vishesha Siddha Pradurbhava Visheshena Swarupena Eva Tatta Karanataya Rajase. You are Swarat, fully independent, which is to say that your senses are a unique, self-accomplished manifestation of the potency inherent in your essential being, which is the Swarupa Shakti. You exist with the senses that are a unique manifestation of your own Swarupa. Tesham Swarupa Bhutatvena Mukhya Karanatva Ayogaditi Bhavaha. The implication is that because your senses are part of your own essential being, the term Karana cannot be taken in the primary sense. So when we use the word Karana in the primary sense, in that sense, the Karana instrument is different from the Karta. Instrument does not contain any aspect which is integral to the Karta. This is the meaning of the Karana in the primary sense. But when we, in the case of the Bhagavan, the Karana, the senses, are part of his own essential being. Therefore, when we talk about the Bhagavan's Karana, the word Karana is not used in the primary sense, but the word Karana is used in the secondary sense. So, Anyatau Aupadika Vastudvara Tava Api Prakashe Katam Nama Swarat Tvam Siddhyediticha. Otherwise, if you manifested yourself through something Anyata Aupadika Vastudvara, otherwise, if the Bhagavan manifested himself through something which is extraneous to himself, then how can he be called as Swarat? If the Bhagavan is actually to accomplish some activity, if he is using some sense which is extraneous to himself, then how can he be called a Swarat? It will contradict his quality as Swarat. And then he is quoting to Shruti Vakya, Ananda Matram Ajaram Puranam Ekam Santam Bahuda Drishyamana. And then Neha Nanasti Kinchana. These are all from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Ananda Matram Ajaram Puranam is pure bliss, devoid of old age, Ajaram, and primeval, Puranam, Santam, Ekam Santam Bahuda Drishyamana, the one seen as many. And Neha Nanasti Kinchana, there are no distinctions within Brahman. And
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Prabhuji, it's very different to understand, difficult to understand that how that Lord's senses are integral part of his energy and body means. Then how also the sloka Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti. So how these two corroborate actually? He's a Swarat, agreed. He doesn't need any extraneous support to perceive something, which is integral part of his perception. But we don't get to understand how it is possible.
Yeah, that is why, see, Angani Asi Sakalendriya Vrittimanti, that shows that how Krishna accomplishes all the activities through any of his senses. Any one of his senses can perform the functions of others. So this itself shows that Krishna's senses are completely different from our senses. In our senses, we can perform only one activity through one sense. We cannot see with our ears. But Krishna's senses are, he can perform any activity through any of his senses. This is also the import of the Bhagavad Gita shloka, Sarvata Pani Padam Tat, Sarvatokshi Shiro Mukham. Everywhere are his hands and legs. That means Krishna can perform any action through any of his senses. This shows that his senses are different from our senses. In the case of our senses, the Jivatma infuses his energy on the senses. And therefore, we are able to use the senses, and the senses are extraneous to the living entity. The senses are extraneous to the living entity, and in the case of the living entity, we have the concept of liberation from the clutches of the subtle body and the gross body. So the living entity is in an environment which is extraneous to himself. He is put within the gross body and subtle body, which are the senses. But in the case of the Supreme Lord, there is no concept of liberation because his senses are inherent part of his nature, just like the example of heat and light. So the heat is actually the light is an inherent part of the fire, inherent aspect of the fire. It is not something extraneous to the fire. So similarly, the senses are integral part of Krishna. It is not different from him.
Thank you, bro.
Like for example, we make certain functions in South India, we North India also. Sometimes certain sweets are made, and those sweets are made in the shape of a particular object. Sometimes sweets are made in the shape of a particular object, and in that object there will be particular hand may be there, leg may be there, hand may be there, leg may be there, but but you can eat the entire sweet. You can eat the entire sweet because every aspect of that structure is actually composed of the sweetness. It's not something you suppose Ganapati is made in the Ganapati or an elephant is made. But a sweet is made in the shape of an elephant. So it is not that you remove the certain part of the elephant and then you eat that. So suppose if I'm just giving say for example, a sweet is made in the shape of a brinjal, for example. Sweet is made in the shape of a brinjal. So normally in the case of a brinjal, when you are cooking a brinjal, you will actually remove the top portion of the brinjal and then you will cut it and then you will cook it. The certain extraneous part of the brinjal will be removed and then you will cut and then cook it. But the sweet is made in the shape of a brinjal. You can even eat that. You can eat the entire part of the brinjal without removing anything because the entire thing is actually made of sweetness. There is nothing extraneous element is not there. In the sweet made in the shape of a brinjal. But in the other brinjal, there is an extraneous element of the what do you say? The top portion. Only after removing it, then you start cooking.
The crown portion.
Crown portion. So another shloka is quoted. Ananda matra karapada mukodaradihi ityadi smritescha. Another smriti vakya is quoted. His hands, feet, mouth and belly are pure bliss. Ananda matra. Kara pada mukodaradihi. Mukha udara adihi. They are all composed of bliss. They are composed of pure bliss. That's why I mentioned that. The brinjal, the crown portion is also composed of sweetness only. You can eat that crown portion also. Or we can say a cake made in the shape of a train. In a normal train, suppose when you go inside the toilet, you don't, you just do the respond to the nature's call and then immediately come out actually. But in the cake made in the shape of a train, you can even take the toilet portion of the train and then you can eat it actually. Because everything is composed of pure sweetness. But in the normal train, you cannot do like that. So similarly, in the case of the living entity, the senses are extraneous to his original nature. They are different from him. But in the case of Supreme Lord, Ananda Matra Kara Pada Mukodaradihi. His hands, feet, mouth and belly are pure bliss. And there is an object.
Sorry to interrupt. Complete, Prabhuji. Sorry.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah. So is it like even that when we speak about that Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagwan, so like the sunshine, the sun disk, and the inner affairs of the sun planet, they cannot be separated from each other. So like Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagwan, they are all absolute truth. You cannot separate. Is it like okay to say like that, or that's not appropriate? Like
there are three aspects of the absolute truth. So that's a different concept actually.
okay,
Here we are talking about the senses of the supreme absolute truth. They are all composed of pure bliss.
Okay.
But in the case of the living entity, the senses are inert in nature. The Jivatma is spiritual, but the senses are inert. Yeah. Nanu Mayi Tata Bhuta Swarupa Shaktinam Astitayam Kim Pramana. There's an objection raised. What proof is there that such potencies exist in my essential being? What is the proof? What the proof of all saying? Then Vedas are saying that Tatra Ahuhu Akila Karaka Shakti Daraha iti. Akila Karaka. Karaka means what? Karaka means sense only. Akila Karaka Shakti Dara means you are the upholder of everybody's sensory powers. Akhilebhyaha Pranibhyaha Karakani. Karakani means Karanani. Chakshuradi Golakani. Teshu Shaktish Chendriyani Dharasi Dadasi iti tata sarveshu teshu tatat adaranat. That means you supply all living beings with the physical seats of the senses, such as the eye. So what we see actually when we see a nostril, this nose is not the actual sense. The nostril is the physical seat, and within that there is a subtle sense organ is sitting there, which we are not able to see. That is a granendriya. But when you are saying the eye is the physical seat, but in the physical seat there is a subtle sense organ which is the chakshur indriya. The chakshur indriya we are not able to see, but the physical seat of that chakshur indriya that we are seeing. So you supply all living beings with the physical seats of the senses, such as the eye, as well as with the energies within them. That is the sensory powers themselves. Now that is the meaning of the word Akila Shakti Dara, Akila Karaka Shakti Dara. Tastu Twayi Swataha Siddha Avyaya Purna Eva Santi iti Bhavaha. Since you thus maintain the senses of all living beings in the respective seats, so you must naturally be endowed with the senses that are Swataha Siddha, which are self-existent, and Avyaya, which are imperishable, and Purna, which are complete. Naturally, because you only maintain all the living entities in the senses, so naturally you must be having the senses which must be self-existent, Purna, and unlimited, imperishable. So if somebody is actually making others, if somebody is providing others eyes, ears, etc., then naturally he must also be having the sense. And because he is actually providing everyone the eyes, therefore his senses, because he is providing the senses for all the living entities, therefore his senses must be Swataka Siddha. Swataka Siddha, that means self-existent, and Avyaya, inexhaustible and complete. And there are Vedic statements which give pramana for this. Pranasya pranam huta chakshushash chakshuhu ityadya swabhaviki jnana balakriyacha. Brahman is the vitality of the vital force. He only supplies the vital force to everyone. And is a chakshushcha chakshuhu. He is the eye of the eye. That means he only supplies the sensory power of seeing for all the living entities. Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. He is naturally endowed with cognitive potency, volition, and power to act. Swabhaviki, naturally endowed. That's a Swataka Siddha. Taduktam Ekadashi. There is another verse in the 11th canto which confirms this. Yatkaya Yesha Bhuvana Trayasan Nivesho Yasyendriyais Tanugrutam Ubayendriyani Jnanam Swatash Shvasanato Balamojaiha Satvadibhistitilayodbhava Adikarta. Through his senses arise the twofold senses of all living beings. Ubayendriyani. Through his senses arise the twofold Yasya Indriyas Tanubrutam Ubayendriyani. Through his senses arise the twofold senses of all living beings. Twofold senses means Karmendriya and Jnanendriya. And He himself is consciousness, jnanam swatah. And actually, the complete meaning of the shloka, I'll read. The complete meaning of the shloka is that Yat Kaya Yesha Bhuvanatrayam. The three worlds exist within his body. Yat Kaya Yesha. And Yasyendriyas Tanubrutam Ubhayendriyani. Through his senses arise the twofold senses of all living beings, Karmendriyas and Jnanendriyas. Jnanam Swatah. He himself is consciousness. Shvasanato. His breath is the source of Balam Oja Iha, bodily strength, sensory power, and actions of all embodied beings, Satvadibihi. And Sthiti Layodbhava Adikarta. He is the primary agent, Adikarta, primary agent for creation, maintenance, and destruction through the agency of the material gunas, Satvadibihi. So this is the words which actually again confirm the Shruti Vakya. How Bhagavan senses from his senses arise the senses of all living beings. And his breath is the source of the bodily strength, sensory powers, the actions of all living beings. Atayeva Vikaranatvat Neti Chet Taduktam. This is the Brahma Sutra Vakya. Vikaranatvat Neti Chet Taduktam. Ityatra Sutrakarepi Taduktam Ityanena Shrutestu Shabda Mulatvat. Another Vedanta Sutra. Ityukta Rityaiva Shrutyek Gamyam Tarkatitam Tasya Vikaranatvam Takaranatvam Cha Saditavan. What is the meaning? Therefore, Vyasadeva wrote in Brahma Sutra, Vikaranatvat Neti Chet Taduktam. If one objects that Brahman cannot be the creator, if somebody objects Brahman cannot be the creator because he is without sense organs, the response, Vikaranatva, Karana means sense. Vikaranatvat, because he is not having senses, he cannot be the creator. If somebody gives an argument, Chet means, Chet has a meaning of if, Yadi, Vikaranatvat na iti. Because he does not have senses, na iti, he cannot be the creator. Chet, if somebody gives an argument like that, you can see that the language is so crisp actually. Vikaranatvat na iti chet. Because he is without senses, he cannot be the creator. If somebody says like that, taduktam. Taduktam. The response is that the argument has already been settled by scripture. Taduktam. It has been already been settled by scripture. That means where it was settled? Shrutestu Shabda Mulatvat. Shrutestu Shabda Mulatvat. That means the Vedas say that the Lord is free from the defects and he can be understood only by Shabda. Only through the revealed sound. So through our normal logic, somebody does not have a sense, he cannot be creator. If somebody does not have a sense organ, he cannot be the creator through our normal logic. But in the case, but it has already been told, we can understand the absolute truth only through the revealed sound, only through the, not through the logic, but only to Shrutestu Shabda Mulatvat, only through the Shruti Vakya. And then he says, Ityukta Rityaiva Shrutyaika Gamyam Tarka Atitam Tasya Vikaranatvam Sakaranatvam Cha Saditavan. The Vyasa establishes that the Lord exists. Vikaranatvam Sakaranatvam. He exists both with and without senses. According to the principle that Tarkatitam, the objects beyond logic, can be ascertained only through revelation. Only through revelation. The Bhagavan is with senses and without senses. He is with the spiritual senses, which are part of his integral nature, and is without material senses, which are extraneous to a living, which are extraneous to a person. And Shrutischa na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. As the Shruti states, he has no material body, or he has no material senses. Na karyam na karanam. Karya here refers to the body, karana refers to the senses. He has no material body and he has no material senses. Athava अखिल कारक शक्तिधरोपि त्वम् असावकरण एव इत्यन्वयः. Alternative explanation of the words. Athava, alternative explanation. So, Akila Karaka Shakti Dharopi Tvam Asau Akarana Eva Ityanvaya. Although you are self-effulgent, upholder of everyone's sensory powers, you are without any senses. Kutaha. How can it be possible? Swarat Ityadi. Because you are supremely independent. Because you are supremely independent. Ataha Sarvato Vilakshana Mahimatvad Animisha Deva Indradayas Tat Pujya Vishwasrujo Brahmadayo Api Tava Tubhyam Balim Upaharam Tad Uchaihi Shirobir Vahanti. Because your magnificence is supremely distinguished. Sarvato Vilakshana, because your greatness is supremely distinguished beyond everyone. Vilakshana Mahimatvad, beyond everyone. Therefore, Animishaha, that means Animisha means all the Devatas, headed by Indra, Indradayas, and even the Tat Pujya, and even those who are worshipped by Indra, and even the higher dimensional beings worthy of their worship, that means worthy of the worship of Indra. Who are them? Vishwasruja, such as Brahma, the architect of the universe. Vishwasruk, the Brahma, who is the Vishwasruk. They all carry all these things. What they do? Balim upaharam. They carry their offerings to you. How? Uchai shirobir vaganti. They carry their offering upon their heads. The prefix ut is actually used. Udvahanti, which shows actually they carry their offerings on their heads out of respect. Out of respect. And then further, Ajaya. Ajaya Tesham Adhikarinya Mayaya Api Sahita. They are also accompanied by Aja. Aja refers to Maya. Who is there? Adhikarinya, who is their overseer. The Maya is the overseer of all these devatas. They are accompanied by Maya also. Sa api Abhasa Shakti Rupa Swarupananda Shakti Mayaya Tubhyam Atma Sampad Udbhavanartam Balim Harati Ityartha. That means that in order for her own opulence to become activated, Atma Sampad Udbhavanartam. Atma Sampad Udbhavanartam means in order for her own opulence to become activated, even Maya, who is the Abhasa Shakti Rupa, who is your shadow potency. What does she do? Balim Harati. She carries offerings to you. She carries offerings to you, who is Swarupa Ananda Shakti Maya, who is actually endowed with unlimited inherent potencies. So you see the Swarupa Ananda Shakti Mayaya. Here the Chaturthi Vibhakti is used. Sampradana Karaka. Ramaya. So when you offer when you When you offer something to a person, the person whom you are offering, that person will be used in the Sampradana Karaka, Chaturthi Vibhakti. Here, the Maya is actually Balim Harati. She is actually offering Balim, the offerings unto whom? Swarupa Ananda Shakti Mayaya. To the Bhagavan who is endowed with inherent blissful unlimited potencies. Samadanti cha Manushair Dattam Havya Kavyadi Lakshanam Balim Bhakshayanti cha. So Samadanti, the Devas also consume the sacrifices. The Devas also, Devas, they come and make offerings to Bhagavan, and they also consume the sacrifices that human beings, Manushair Dattam, that human beings offer them in the form of Havya and Kavya. Havya, Kavya. Havya is the oblations to the gods, and Kavya is the oblations to the Pitras, the deceased forefathers. The Devatas, they consume the offering made by the humans to them. So here the Atra Drishtantah Varsha Bhuja Iva. Varsha Bhuja Iva. Varsha Bhuja means, Varsha means a province. Varsha means Khanda Mandalam. So that means smaller provincial kings, they make offerings to bigger kings. And those bigger kings, they come and offer it to the emperor. So the human beings, they worship the Devatas, and the Devatas, they come and worship the Supreme Lord. So Katam Balim Udvakanti Tad Ahuhu Vidadati Iti. In what manner do the gods carry their offerings? In response, it is said that Vidadati Iti, that means they carry out their prescribed duties. The Devatas performing the prescribed duties, that itself is actually equivalent to carrying their offerings unto Bhagavan. So, Tvad Agya Palanameva Baliharanam Ityartaha. That means following the orders given by Bhagavan, that is the same as carrying an offering. Agya Palanameva Baliharanam Ityartaha. And how the Devatas are performing their carrying out the orders of Bhagavan. For that, the verse is quoted from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Bishasmat vatapavate Bisho deti suryah Bishasmad agnischindrascha Mrityur dhavati panchamah. A similar verse also comes in Kapila Dev's teachings. Madbayat vati vatoyam Suryas tapati madbayat Varshatindro dahatyagnir Mrityuscharati madbayat. Here the Taittiriya Upanishad verse is mentioning. Out of fear of him, the wind blows. Out of fear of him, the sun shines. And out of fear of him, the fire burns. And Indra rules. And Mrityu flees. Mrityur davati panchamaha. Yes, few more things will come. We can complete this Anucheda. Atava nanu mama panyadi karananam swarupa bhutatve yuktim katayati iti. An alternative explanation is as follows. So the Lord says, explain the reasoning behind the statement that mama panyadi karananam swarupa bhutatve, that my senses such as my hands are part of my swarupa shakti. Explain the reasoning. You said that my senses are part of my essential nature. Explain that. What is the reasoning behind it? So, Ata Ahu, in response, the Vedas are saying, Animishaha, Karanadi, Animishaha here refers to the Devatas. Which Devatas? Karanadi Karana Adhishtatra Devata. Karana Adhishtatra Devata, the Devatas who are the presiding deities of the senses. Karana Adhishtatra Devatas Tava Balim Udvakanti Iti. The gods, the presiding deities of the senses, they carry their offerings to you. Ajanaja Devatvad Vishwasrujo Vishvesham Srishti Hetavah. So you see that another alternative explanation is given. Uh, So Ajanaja Devatvat Vishwasrujo Vishvesham Srishti Hetavah. The gods are the creators of the universe and they are called as Ajanaja. Ajanaja means the presiding deities of the unmixed elements such as Mahatattva. And the gods are the creators of the universe. They are called Ajanaja and thus are the causes behind everything created. Vishvesham Srishti Hetava. They are the causes behind everything created. Anye Tattad Adhishtatra Devata Ashraya Deva Karanair Vishayam Prakashayatum Shaknuvanti. Other living beings, Anye, other living beings, Tattat Adhishtatra Devata Ashraya Deva. Other living beings are able to perceive the different sense objects through their individual senses only due to the support of this presiding deities of the senses. Because of the presiding deities of the senses, because of their support only, all the living entities are able to use their senses. Prabhupada writes in one purport in second canto, 10th chapter. Even in the matter of evacuation, we need the cooperation of a particular presiding deity of a devata. If the cooperation of the devata is not there, we will not be able to evacuate properly. So here it says that similar thing. Other living beings are able to perceive the sense objects through their individual senses only due to the support of these presiding deities. 1 minute. Further, Tvam Punastesham api ashraya iti Tvat Karananam Swaprakashatapattehe Swarupa Bhutatve Bhutatvam Bhutatvam iti. But you in turn are the support of these presiding deities of the senses. You are actually support of the presiding deities of the senses. And thus since your sense organs are self-luminous, Swaprakashata apattehe. Evidently, they must be innate in your essential being. The senses must be innate in your essential being. So, because all these presiding deities of the senses, they are worshipping the Bhagavan. And the presiding deities of the senses, they control the senses of all the living entities. So therefore, the Supreme Lord, and he is not dependent on this presiding deities of the senses, rather he controls them. So therefore, his sense organs are self-luminous, and they must be innate in his. They are part of his innate essential nature. Atapi astam mahashaktir maya eva ashraya iti. So Krishna says that, oh, ignore all that. It is really the all-powerful Maya that is their shelter. Don't say that I am the shelter of the. So Krishna gives argument. You are saying that I am the controller of the presiding deities of the senses. No, it is the all-powerful Maya which is the shelter of the presiding deity of the senses. Mahashaktir Maya eva ashrayeti. So in response, the Vedas are saying that Ajaya iti. These presiding deities of the senses are accompanied by Maya. They are accompanied by Maya and they come and offer, they worship you. They offer worship to you. And then another objection. Nanu jiva api nija indriya adhishthatranam ashraya bhavanti. Aren't the living beings also the shelter of the presiding deities of their own sense organs? Is it not the fact that the living beings are controlling these presiding deities of the sense organs? Tatra ahuhu vidadati iti. The devatas carry out the responsibilities out of awe and reverence to you. Bhavatas chakita. Vishaya bhoga dvareshu indriyeshu bhavata vishwapatina datta adhikarana devanama evadikaryaha katipaya grama bhaumika iva jiva iti na tesham ashrayaha kintu bhavan eva tesham adhikarakatvad ashraya iti bhavaha. You are the devas carry out the responsibilities out of eva of you. You are the Lord of the universe. And you have granted authority over the various sense organs, which are the gates of sensual enjoyment, to these presiding deities of the senses. You are the Lord, and you only gave authority over the various sense organs to these presiding deities of the senses. And the living beings who are like small village landowners, Grama Bhaumika Iva, they are not the shelter of the presiding deities of the senses. Only you have bestowed such authority on the presiding deities, and you are their shelter. So in this way, we see that there are two explanations are given. In one explanation, the Animisha Deva are interpreted particularly as the presiding deities, Devatas who are the presiding deities of the senses. And another explanation, they are described as the Devatas headed by Brahma. And these Devatas headed by Indra, and they come along with Brahma and Maya in order to worship the Bhagavan. In order to worship the Bhagavan. And these Devas, they in turn are actually accepting the sacrifices offered by the humans to them. In another explanation, these Devas are considered to be the presiding deities of the senses. And then actually three explanations are given. Atava like that, two times it has come. Three explanations are given. The first explanation, how the Bhagavan is the everyone's sensory powers. That means he only supplies all living beings the physical sense of the senses. Yeah, different explanations. Two explanations are given for one sentence. But other lines in the shloka have the same meaning. But for this sentence, the devatas coming and offering worshipping the Bhagavan. For this, there are two explanations are given. One refers to the general devatas headed by Indra. Another refers to the devatas headed by the devatas who are the presiding deities of the senses. So in this way, this shloka, we are yet to go through the commentary. Commentary maybe we'll go through it next week. Almost we have covered all the points, but we'll go through the commentary next week. This Anucheda essentially talks about how the Bhagavan's senses are transcendent. And the Bhagavan's senses are inherent, they are inherent part of his essential nature. In the case of living entity is called as Sakarana, Bhagavan is called as Akarana. In the case of the living entity, the living entity is conscious, but the senses are inert. Because the Jivatma infuses its energy over the inert senses, therefore he is able to use the senses, and the senses are different from its essential nature. The senses of the living entity, they don't contain any aspect which is integral part of the Jivatma. But in the case of the Bhagavan, the senses are part of his essential nature, and the proof which is described that the Bhagavan, he is having senses, it's part of the essential nature because he is the one who gives the sensory powers to all the living entities. Akila Shakti Karakadara. Akila Shakti Karakadara. And how all the devatas are actually worshipping the Bhagavan. They come and make their offerings to Bhagavan. Making offerings to Bhagavan, it is equivalent to carrying out the orders of Bhagavan. Carrying out the orders of Bhagavan. So these points were discussed today. Anybody has any questions or comments? We'll take up.
Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hari.
This presiding deities of the senses are direct expansion of the Lord. They are not regular demigods, right?
They are not mentioned as direct expansions. They are not Vishnu Tattva. They are not mentioned as a Vishnu Tattva. They are basically different living entities who are given that particular post. They are devatas. They are devatas, but they have a particular function to control the different senses of the living entities. And they are also living entities only.
Are they controlled by Indra or the Lord himself directly? Brahman.
They are controlled by Bhagavan. Even if they are under the control of some other devata, those devatas are under the control of Bhagavan.
Okay.
So this verse clearly says, this verse, the explanation which we just read, these presiding deities of the senses are controlled by Bhagavan. They are appointed by Bhagavan. They are given that adhikara by the Bhagavan. That is what this verse clearly says. Because they come and make their offerings. They worship the Bhagavan. That means they are appointed by Bhagavan. They report to Bhagavan. They get their power from the Bhagavan.
Yes, Prabhu. In fifth canto, we come across that the senses and presiding deity and the super deity for the in charge of the presiding deity, that this thing is given, table is given in the Subodhini. Yeah, I remember that.
Second canto, 10th chapter.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So we'll stop here. Next week we'll continue. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai. Jai.
Gaura Bhakta ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.